So guys, thing that happened to me. I caught my wife, precious in every way, cheating on me. But what can I do? Life is tough. And I was still guilty of it. Can you imagine? For one, can't, but it's a fact. But first things first, I got a business trip. Everything is as it should be. I gathered for a couple of days. My wife carefully packed my anxious suitcase for such cases. Preci looked me in the eye, a whimpering tear let down, like, how am I without you, my dear? I'd of course too, almost shed a tear, but held back in time. I'm not some wimp crying before a business trip. My brothers and I had to go with one deer to deal with another area. He didn't want to give the money to the owner. Of course, I ended up being the reindeer. But that's okay. So we drove off, had already jumped out of town, and were on the verge of neighboring areas as we received a call from the chief. Come back, the deer, the money returned with interest. Everything is cool. We turn around, we come back. What do? The whole day is wasted. Went to the sauna to get cleaned up from the road. All that stuff. Then the guys went to see the fun girls. I said no. I'd been married for a year, loved my wife, and wasn't cheating on her, honestly. I wanted a normal family. I came home and decided to fucking surprise him. I came home with a bouquet of roses, and there's silence in the apartment. I did not understand, but my wife's clothes are still there. And the strangest thing, someone else's clothes, and someone else's men's shoes. I'm confused. I go into the bedroom. There's the wife with some guy with no clothes on. You don't even have to use your brain to figure out what's going on. They weren't playing chess. I'm so culturally upset, I can't believe it. Well, you know what I mean, my friends. Since I am obviously not a weak guy, and I do not know how to fight, not even once. When I was a kid, I was active in street gangs. And then in gyms, hitting peers, I started bouncing off the walls like a ping pong ball off a racket. Yes, I realize now that he had a great romance, with his fingers out of joint. But is what it is. Some will say, why him? What for? I'm all for it. Like, if she doesn't want it, the frayer won't jump in. That's all true. But here's the thing. I was offended, to the core, my poetic and subtle nature. It's not that he's a trench dog jumping on a trampoline with my wife. Okay, she's a dumb cork, even though she's beautiful, but you have a brain. For this case, there are cars, in which you can make lovey-dovey full length. Or on the mesa of hotels, or at least a shitty back alley if you can't stand it, but not my bedroom. It's where I sleep. Anyway, he was bouncing off the walls. Then he decided to go out the window on his own, so to speak voluntarily. Good thing we have a second floor, otherwise I do not even know. But even here, the bastard managed to break his leg. My wife, my precious wife, went into the hallway while I was playing ping pong with her boyfriend. From there, she jumped out into the entryway, not really dressed, I'd even say not dressed at all, and started screaming like a voiceover. She needed the police. And I thought, when the stray went out the window, without saying goodbye, to talk to my wife. I go out the front door, and my neighbor is staring at my wife, his jaw on the floor. And he doesn't get what his neighbor is asking him to do. And it would have worked if I hadn't turned my neighbor into his apartment. You should have a conscience, drilling into other people's wives with your bourgeoisie. My wife jumped out of the staircase at that moment. She had no shame or conscience at all. The children were walking there. Well, I think she will run and come back, at least to put on underwear and a robe. Otherwise, it's an outrage. What did the neighbors think of us? Shame on them. There's an old lady here, a dandelion of God. She used to work for the NKVD when she was young, so she called the Special Forces from the Interior Ministry. Serious guys in helmets, armor, and machine guns. I even saw a couple of snipers and one machine gun. It's a good thing we turned in our guns when we arrived, or I wouldn't have needed Article 222 of the Criminal Code. Without talking to me like an honest kid, they stormed off as if I'd taken hostages. I didn't want to aggravate the situation because I was in my own apartment and I felt sorry for it. I lay down as usual on the floor and put my hands on the back of my head. Everything was as it should be. They put the bracelets on my hands and dragged me to the car. While we were driving to the department, I told them the reason for the commotion. The Spetsnaz officers sympathized with me, purely manly, but said that beating me and throwing my lover out the window was still not the right thing to do. I admitted my guilt, but partially because he went out the window himself along with the frame. I served the 3 hours I was supposed to. I wrote an explanation and told everything. I thought it was all over. But they tried to charge me with inflicting bodily harm of medium gravity. That was outrageous. Investigation, trial, everything. But my lawyer proved at the trial that I acted in a state of affect. So I bounced back on probation. But the friar didn't get enough. He sued me for his misery. You know what I mean? He's in my apartment, in my bedroom, on my bed, my wife, and I owe him compensation. He's estimated his misery under the window at $100,000. I was speechless. He needed cottage cheese. He needed a lot of calcium to heal his broken leg. I asked him, in a civilized way, since we were in court, why he had such expensive calcium. Does he bring it from the Emiratis? But the judge, looking at him with oddly amorous eyes, although she had a wedding ring, agreed with the arguments of this bastard. I can't take it from these broads. I had to pay him the dough. But it wasn't yet evening. The boys promised to punish him. We'll figure out what the calcium is and why it's so expensive. But that's all right. The main thing with the wife was the showdown. She ran away and never came back to my place. I filed for divorce myself. And then the outrage continued. First, my beloved mother-in-law came running to me. A witch. Started telling me it was my fault. The young one didn't pay any attention, didn't buy her anything. I was just so shocked when I heard that accusation. I mean, I didn't buy her anything. And I'm like in the song, rings and bracelets, hats and jackets, didn't I get you? What a stingy bastard. I sent my mother-in-law to the woods. That's what I told her, even without the foul language and other insults. I was controlling myself, or I wouldn't want to go to jail for 15 more days. My wife made sure I wasn't going to forgive her. She sued me for division of property and plus compensation for her suffering, since she had to run down the street in her underwear. And she is a shy girl, and for her it was a stress, as a result of which she became depressed, and she needs paid counseling from a psychologist. Yes, my mother is a woman. She was like a gopher from Honduras or something. What stress? What shyness? Well, I cannot from this collective farm, I at one time a year ago, from a striptease. I liked her then, there was something to see. That's what I explained in court. Thank God the judge was a man, or I would have been in trouble. A man is a man. Her claim was denied. It was a total bummer with the partition too. She got nothing. 6 months later, I was single again. And then my ex-wife started calling me again, wondering about my affairs, my health. She started asking me out on a date. You know, brazen, like a supertanker for sprint. I looked at myself in the mirror after that and saw a kind of normal man. I just began to find my composure. I regularly went to my inspector, marked for my probation. So I wondered why I had to go through all this again. I have a nervous job as it is. So I put it in the blacklist and generally changed the number. What I want to say, my friends, still in the bachelor life, there are advantages. You want to go to the sauna with the fun girls, you're welcome. You come home, and the bedroom is clean, and no strangers. This is especially true for all sorts of obscure freaks. By the way, the guy was still in the meter, but carefully. He gave me 160 grand. I'd also need calcium-filled cottage cheese and special, not cheap, after that stress. Now let's move on to the second story. If I had heard that, I probably would have thought the whole story was made up. But alas, it wasn't. Things like that on TV happen in real life too, and I am the sad proof of that. I grew up in a village and was a typical boy: soccer, hide and seek, cigarettes, then alcohol, and discos. I didn't want to settle down when I graduated from high school. I did anything to get some money for fun. I did pretty well, even though my positions weren't very prestigious. I was a chauffeur for a businessman friend, and he paid me well. When he disappeared, we rented a diner, and everything was going well until my partner and I had a fight. In short, I always had at least some money, and today I think that's what attracted Anya to me. The first time I saw her, I was ready to do anything to win her favor. I knew at once that it was her, but I wasn't sure if she liked me, since I wasn't lucky with girls. But that wasn't the case in that situation. We started dating, and after 8 months, she told me the good news that we were expecting a baby. I was looking forward to it, and immediately asked her to marry me. We had a great wedding. I was happy, but at the same time, I knew that I would have to find a job where I could make more money. For the first 2 years, I worked continuously away from home in a foreign city. Then I got a job on a rotational basis in another city. The work schedule was month after month, so I managed to take care of little Dasha as well. My acquaintances said that I was spoiling her, but I just wanted to make up for the fact that she hadn't seen her father for a long time. I wanted to do everything for her. After a while, however, I got a better offer. The problem was that I originally had to take a pre-med course. I hesitated, but I agreed, especially since Annie really wanted it. The first few months everything went well, and Annie was also happy. Of course, we had some bad moments, especially because she spent a lot. But overall we were happy, and little Dasha grew up. I didn't even notice when she went to school. Things went wrong last summer. My shift man was sick, so I had to work for him. The season was in full swing. There was nothing I could do. I was glad to get home, 2 days in a month. That's why I was surprised when Anya announced to me that she was pregnant again. She had punched in the delivery date, but I happened to notice that the date in her pregnancy book didn't match my calculations. I didn't understand when we could have conceived it. I hadn't even lived at home properly. But I decided I was misunderstanding something about female physiology, so I didn't worry about it. But later on, I started to get nervous. When Timer was born, he looked like he wasn't even our baby. When I went to their maternity hospital, I looked up his blood type in his medical records. After searching the internet for information based on our blood types, I realized that Timer could not be my son. It was a punch below the belt. I had never suspected Anya of anything. I guess the assumption that women are better men than men is probably true. They know how to hide cheating. When I confronted her with the fact, she denied it at first. I went into such a frenzy that I almost hit her, and she got scared. She confessed to everything. It turned out that Dasha wasn't mine either, which I didn't expect at all. Each child had a different father. So she had changed her mind once. I was just furious, and I was really afraid I was going to kill Anya. I don't understand how she could do that to me. I left for good in another city, and I want to put the children out of my mind, who are not even mine. I have to forget the past and start life anew. Story 2. I have a history of cheating on my wife. I am healthy and capable of having children. I have been married for over 12 years. My daughter is 9. My wife, of course, was and is not passionate, but I treat her as my closest and dearest person. By the way, I have never cheated on her. My wife always wanted a second child. I put it off and kept getting away from a direct answer to the question of when. I wanted one or the other. I wanted alone. I did not want additional obligations, frankly speaking. I thought that I will not be able to afford it. Suddenly, she told me that she was pregnant. I was very surprised and tensed. But I didn't ask any questions. I was afraid to offend her. Well, nothing to do. I held my breath and began to wait for the birth of the child. I remember I wanted very much to look like me. a boy was born. While still in a maternity ward, my wife sent me pictures. The baby seemed too ugly. I didn't have that feeling with my daughter. But then I thought that all children on the day of birth are not handsome, and scolded myself for the dark thoughts. Next, I raised him, loved him a lot. But at the same time, I saw that there was nothing of me in him, nothing at all. And even such things as his character was very different from my daughter's. And he had a peculiar smell that I could smell. Sometimes I would ask my wife questions. Why doesn't he look like me? She would answer that he looked like her, that it happens, it can't be helped. I even said to my wife, "You don't mind if I do?" She said no problem. I remember being very annoyed by people saying that my son didn't look like me in company or when I showed a picture to someone. Eventually, 3.5 years later, I decided on a DNA test. My wife found out, as the child himself told her that he had gone to the hospital with Daddy and was making blood. I didn't deny it. There was a scandal with my wife. She yelled, "Why embarrass herself?" I told her I was such a fool. I wanted to have 100% confirmation that he was my son. Take it philosophically, because you have nothing to fear. That's when she told me that she had a stormy affair a few years ago, and she didn't know whose baby it was, and she didn't want to do it, kill the baby. And as soon as she got pregnant, she immediately broke up with her lover. All these years, she said, she lived, and she was afraid that the deception would be revealed. But she didn't believe that I would dare to take a DNA test. And she told me all this so that I wouldn't take the test results, that I would consider the child my own, and that I would stay with my family. You know, I can't even find the words to describe what I felt. It's just impossible. It was like walking somewhere, and then bam. And there was nowhere else to go, as if your heart and soul were ripped out of you, only you didn't die, but continued to live and suffer. I wanted to disappear from the face of the earth, to fall through the earth, just not to think about it. I couldn't help it. I gave her an impressive slap. She fell off the chair. I was very frightened, but she seemed fine. She didn't report me to the police. I packed my things and left. I don't hide it. I needed the help of a psychotherapist. After a while, the result of DNA testing was ready. My paternity was ruled out. I was already mentally prepared for this and listened to everything that was explained to me about all sorts of alleles. In the end, I am destroyed. My wife suffers. My 2 children suffer. She begs me to go back, not to destroy the family, asks for forgiveness, says she loves me, that she made a big mistake then, talks nonsense about having a 3rd child. But I don't believe her. Not a word of it. A woman can't have a child with a man she doesn't love. Which means she didn't have any feelings for me years ago. That's the kind of disaster I've had in my life. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So that's the story. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss new stories.